It is a pleasure for me to welcome you to Lewis University. My name is Dave Livingston, and I'm the president here at Lewis. And I just wanted to take a couple minutes, certainly to thank Scott and his family for coming back home to our area from DC and joining us today. What we celebrate today is complicated, and certainly Scott is going to share that with us. All of us, certainly in the university setting, are well aware of how complicated racism is in the United States. We have made some strides, but we have a very, very long way to go. And in some ways, it's more complicated now than it has been, I think, in several decades because of the divisions that we face in our society and the ability that we have now shown to really lower the rhetoric in our country and create a situation where many of us are incredibly uncomfortable with where leadership stands in terms of just the willingness to engage in healthy conversations. At universities like Lewis, we have a firm commitment to social justice. Catholic social teaching and the Catholic intellectual tradition draw us to have a respect for all human beings and to demand that charity is not enough, but that justice is required. And the law is one of those places where we constantly refine our understandings of justice. It's the place where we do that. And so to have an attorney of Scott Bolden's stature to join us and engage in a conversation about race and law is a privilege. And especially for our students, certainly we are grateful to those of you who are guests to Lewis University today. But for our students, you will leave Lewis University and become citizens, and you will have to make decisions about voting, and you will have to make decisions about leadership, and you will become leaders. And I think you will see today in Attorney Bolden's remarks someone who has taken leadership and pushed the American agenda forward towards greater justice. And so we are incredibly grateful to have him. It is now my pleasure to hand over the mic to Dr. Christy Kelly, who will introduce our speaker. And I just want to say thank you to Christy for her work in setting this up, and to several of you behind the scenes, both in our advancement office, conferences and events, members of our Board of Trustees who have made today possible. So I'm incredibly grateful for all the work that goes on behind the scenes. Dr. Kelly?
Thank you, Dr. Livingston, for our welcome, and thank you to all of you for being here. The next speaking voice that you will hear is that of Mr. A. Scott Bolden, who was a friend of Lewis University. Scott is the managing partner at the Washington, D.C. office of Reed Smith, LLP. As a prominent trial and white-collar defense lawyer to whom companies and individuals turn for representation in their most significant concerns, Scott has handled some of the most high-profile matters in and out of the nation's capital. He is particularly adept at assisting clients in navigating crises that present significant legal, business, and reputational risks. As a part of his multifaceted litigation practice, Scott has defended clients in local and federal courts in connection with civil RICO claims, fraud, including healthcare fraud and breach of contract, False Claim Act violations, education matters, government contract claims and disputes, tort claims, and other commercial and regulatory litigation issues. With respect to his white-collar criminal defense practice, Scott has defended individuals and corporate clients in state and federal trials and grand jury proceedings in connection with money laundering, federal and state tax fraud, bank fraud, financial structuring, and other white-collar criminal issues. He has conducted internal investigations for major public and private corporations. He's conducted SEC investigations and prosecutions, as well as corporate compliance with federal sentencing guidelines, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and defended witnesses and depositions before House and Senate investigation committees. Scott is a former New York prosecutor and serves as a high-profile defense attorney to the megastars. He has been a transformative leader, and as the chair of the National Bar Association's Political Action Committee, he most recently executed bold new initiatives to raise funds for political candidates across the country through the support of 65,000 membership of lawyers, judges, law professors, and law students. For his work in defending his clients, Scott was recognized by his alma mater, Howard University, with the 2013 Distinguished Alumni Award in the field of law. He is also a former recipient of the Washington Business Journal's top lawyer in the white-collar crime category, where he has been declared a super lawyer and a go-to lawyer for individuals and corporations with issues against and before the federal and local governments. In addition to being identified as a super lawyer and a go-to lawyer, Scott has received recent awards and scholarships, including but not limited to the UNFC Masked Ball Leadership Award in 2016, the Greater Washington Urban League President's Award for Service in 2016, the Howard University School of Law Alumni Association Leadership Award, also in 2016, and the Washington, D.C. Super Lawyers Criminal Defense and White Collar in 2013 through 2017. Last but not least, Scott has been a regular panelist on CNN, FNN, Fox Business Network, and TV One, as well as other media outlets. Appearances include political networks and segments on CNN's Newsroom and Situation Room, MSNBC's The Rachel Maddow Show, Fox News' channels Happening Now, TV One's former program News One Now with Roland Martin, and Fox Business Network's After the Bell. He has also appeared on ABC's Good Morning America, 2020, and ESPN. Please join me in receiving Mr. A. Scott Bolden.
Good afternoon. It sure is good to be home. I know a lot of people in this audience, family and friends. Thank you very much. It is good to be home, and yet I got to tell you, as many arguments I've made in court, as many television appearances I've made, I got to tell you, I am both happy and nervous to be here, without a doubt. Especially being in front of my daddy right here, who is my hero. What'd you say? All right now. Let me just say this. Let me thank Lewis University for having the courage and the desire, not only for Black History Month, but for every month, celebrating social justice, diversity, and really moving the intellectual thought on race, racism, and the law forward. I want to thank Dr. Livingston, who has provided tremendous leadership to this university and to the community. My good friend, Michael Parker. Where's Michael? I see him right there. Michael, who was always a giant compared to me when I was 8 years old, and he's still a giant, if you will, since I'm 5'6", 5'7". we've both grown out, but not up before. Michael, that was a love tap. It's okay. It's okay. Dr. Christy Kelly, who you just heard from, whose family I grew up with on South Joliet Street, students, faculty, and really the entire Lewis University community. I also want to thank the Multicultural Student Services. Is anybody here from that organization? All right, thank you very much, without a doubt. Next, I want to recognize my family. Erica Martin, my wife, is here. Where you at? There she is. She is my heart and my heartbeat, who allows me to practice law with passion and shares me and my time with not only my law partners, but my clients and the public, while managing and massaging my ego all at the same time. My Aunt Betty and Uncle Billy, who are ageless wonders, who are close to celebrating their 60th anniversary, 60th wedding anniversary, forgive me. Please recognize them and support them. And they still look like they're in their 20s too, they really have. To Debbie, my cousin, I'm so happy you're here. We don't see each other very often, but we grew up together and talked a lot of trash to each other, even when we didn't know better, without a doubt. I don't think Michael's here, but Michael and Debbie and KK and Alan were like 2 peas in a pod, or 4 peas in a pod, without a doubt. To my father, who represents so much to me. You know, when you're growing up with a lawyer and a judge in the room, in the house, and he's the boss, right? I never really got in trouble with the police because I was really never afraid of the police, ever. I was afraid of him and disappointing him. And I got to tell you, he's been a powerful figure in my life. So many of us grow up worshiping athletes and entertainers, watching them. But I didn't have to have a hero on TV. I had a hero at home. And he was always that to me. The first time I stepped in the courtroom with my father and watched his booming voice and his eloquence, he and I were the only people of color in that Will County courtroom. And the respect that others gave him that did not look like him was even more powerful in the 70s and 80s. There were really no role models. For a long time, he was the only African-American lawyer in Will County, and we certainly knew that. But I certainly respected him for that, and I knew that after I watched him, that there was nothing else I was going to do but to be just like him. Years later, my father would tell me that he wanted me to be better than him. And I certainly try to mimic his strength, his discipline, his manhood and fatherhood, his character and his courage and his integrity and his ability to overcome. So many of us want to be proud or want our parents to be proud of us. I certainly hope that he and my mother, I certainly hope I've made them proud in this journey of life of mine. I think he is proud of me. And to my mother, who is here in spirit, please help me get through this part of my speech. Such a force of nature. She taught and was one of the first black administrators at Lewis University. She fought this administration and fought for her students. She was she was the image, if you will, of being unbought and unbossed. There's an endowed scholarship in her name that I and my brothers and sisters have contributed to. And right now, she would be tickled pink at this gathering of all you good folks. That the scholarship that you all have gathered, that there's a scholarship in her name, that close to 25 years later, I must tell you, after God called her name, I still miss her. And I still talk to her and pray to her, especially in those tough days after court and after losing. The prayer goes something like this. Were you in there with me? Did you see what was happening? Or were you busy with my brother and sister? I needed you here. What's up? Because no lawyer wants to lose. If my father showed me how to be a man in this tough world, my mother narrated that journey every day. I never struggled with the question of race in my life. I just never understood why others did. My journey through race and racism and the law is the following. I was born into the race game. My parents were civil rights activists. My dad was the head of NAACP. He was one of the thousands of local heroes in the civil rights movement that were unsung. He wasn't on TV. He wasn't famous. His last name wasn't King or Malcolm X, but he was a foot soldier for each of them. I grew up watching him lead here in Joliet. I grew up watching him represent on the criminal defense side and civil rights side those of the least, the lost, and the left out. I grew up watching him and my mother, partners in crime, desegregating public facilities, and fighting for justice. I grew up marching before I could walk. As long as there was a piece of watermelon nearby in my mouth, I would be on the front line with them. My mother was a protector of sorts. She was his partner for sure. But I remember in 1968, when Martin Luther King died, the riots in the streets of Joliet, Illinois, that the government lifted the swing bridges to prevent and separate the East from the West. And at home, we were with my mother. We were under attack. I remember her calling the FBI and informing them, or reminding them, that if any harm came to my father while he was in the streets with the ministers and the students who were rebelling and burning down Joliet, Illinois, that they would have hell to pay. And she repeated it over and over again. And they sent agents to the house. We never saw them, but they assured us that they were there. And I also remember us gathering in the den or the basement. She went to find my daddy's .38. She put it on her lap. And me and my brother and sister, who were very young, she cradled us in her bosom. And we just waited. Just waited for my father to come home, hoping and praying that that would be the case. Certainly he came home, and certainly things got better for Joliet and all African Americans in this country. But this was my early education on the question of race. I would go to Providence High School, and the N-word would be used against me on a regular basis. Did I fight? Did I scream? Did I yell? Did I run home and tell my father and mother? That was never the answer. And I would figure out ways to manage school while graduating with honors and forcing people that didn't look like me to stop using that word. At Morehouse, and only Morehouse, a famous all-black male institution, was my legacy and my heart. And though it was an all-black university and college, I went to school with people that looked, sound, and felt like me. And outside of Atlanta, racism would persist. I once got stopped driving someone else's car with some buddies on our way back to Atlanta, and there was a roach, if you will. That's an old term. Marijuana wasn't legal then, but it was a roach, and it was in the ashtray. And I remember the police officer stopping us and letting us go, but the condition for letting us go was that I had to eat this roach. On one hand, it wasn't a tough decision because he promised to let us go. And by the way, we had not been smoking that marijuana. And so, of the four of us, I stood up and said, I'll eat it, for fear that there would be some argument or the officer would change his mind. I ate that roach, and he let us go. I never understood why the cop had to make me eat that roach, but the worst is I may have had to spend the night in jail. I was determined to go to law school even before Morehouse, but that motivated me ever more. At Howard's Law School, I had my daddy's training with me, because you're always learning from my father, especially if you grew up in his household. And I learned from other great lawyers like Luke C. Moore, Julian Dugas, William Bryant, Wiley Branton, legendary lawyers who just happened to be black. Go look them up. Their story is our legacy. I always told myself when I started practicing law that I owed them and my father a debt of excellence. And that debt of excellence would motivate me to be excellent every day. But my old friend and enemy and racism continued. It was always present in my life. I'm the most successful diverse partner in the history of Reed Smith. They've been around 150 years. I made partner in 4 years. I've raised millions of dollars in legal fees for them. As I said, I've sat on the international committee worldwide of this $2 billion organization, and I served as managing partner as I do currently right now. But never before, racism was still either my good enemy or my good buddy. In Washington, when I first got there, I was in front of a Club 2K9 and almost arrested simply for not obeying a police order that made no sense. In 3 of my homes, when the alarm has gone off, in very Tony neighborhoods, the police have come. I've answered the door in my pajamas on 3 separate occasions, and the police have asked me for ID. I looked at my pajamas and said, can I go back in and get my ID? No. I said, I called you. The alarm went off. We corrected it. Here's the code. Is there anything else? Before I was thrown on the ground, put in handcuffs, and asked again, where is your ID? I said, now how are we going to do this? I don't sleep with my ID. Why would I say that? It became a much longer night. I had a First Amendment right to say that, but I probably shouldn't have said that. Eventually, my wife would bring my ID down, and on 2 of those 3 occasions, or all 3 of those occasions, if you will, but it simply made no sense to me. I can't say that the police officers were racist in all of those instances. I'd like not to think that. I'd like to think it was their training, if you will. But I know that a black family in an all-white neighborhood conjures up a lot of bad thoughts and poor practices and poor training. With the police, it's not like some other profession. There are a couple of bad apples. You always hear that, right? It is a profession that cannot stand bad apples. When you have a badge, when you have the gun, and you have the authority of law. Despite all my successes as a lawyer, I have a lot of FBI agents and police officers who are friends of mine. Some have helped me seek justice for my clients appropriately. How is it that a black man in America like me has the same story with the police? How is it? I'm not selling drugs in Southeast Washington. I am, by all the means, living the American dream. I am. And yet, I have the same story as that young man in Southeast Washington who's selling drugs, who is lost to the system and who we find a hard time helping. I submit to you that economics is what separates me from him, but race is what binds me. Economics may separate us, but our race ties those binds. Again, I have never struggled with the race question in my life, but I've always struggled with understanding why America struggles with it herself. Why is it that we're in an opiate epidemic and it's a health crisis? When the 80s and 90s, crack cocaine was a crime problem. Why is it that Tucker Carlson, a conservative TV journalist, struggled to understand my support for the NFL Players Association protest on the field to fight police brutality and social justice despite my financial success? Because if you were successful, somehow you could not suffer from any social justices. I just named a few. Why is it that Laura Ingraham, another conservative journalist, struggled to understand why I could not give Donald Trump any credit for bringing down black unemployment without closing the gap between black and white unemployment, asking me, did black people just want handouts? Donald Trump has no urban agenda, I would argue, and nor targeted programs to reduce African American employment. Why would I give him that credit? Why did Donald Trump call Haiti and sub-Saharan African countries S-hole countries? His ancestors were from developing northern white European developing countries, and we brought them here in our huddled masses. And 50% of those were coming to America from these S-hole countries. 50% of them are college educated. Why does Donald Trump struggle to differentiate between white neo-Nazis and white journalists and those fighting against them in Charlottesville, Alabama, and making us feel that somehow their hate speech is tolerable? Hate speech ain't never been free speech for people of color. What? You can't differentiate before that? And why did white police officers, for whatever reason, kill Freddie Gray, Michael Brown, Walter Scott, Tamir Rice, Philander Castile, and even Tony Person in Joliet, Illinois, 40 plus years ago? You better look Tony Person up. That was a long time ago. Or talk to my father, or Tony Ray out here in the audience, of what that meant to this community. Why are the police, or why do they seem so afraid of people of color in our communities of color? It is a profession, as I've said, that cannot afford bad apples. And why are the working class white Americans so angry about America? Why? And about Barack Obama, and about us being here in America at all. The last 8 years was the result of the Bush economy and the Obama recovery. And the browning of America is upon us. And no wall, no race-based immigration policies will stop that growing diversity or the power of it in this beloved but imperfect country of ours. And why do so many Americans seem to tolerate the chaos and nonsense coming out of the White House and the Senate? It seems too easy to lump them all as deplorables in a basket and label them racist. Clearly, I don't believe that Trump supporters are all racist, but they certainly had no problem electing one. What has happened to my beloved imperfect country? I submit to you in closing, there are two Americas, and always have been. One black, one white, one rich, one poor. Polling tells us, if you ask white Americans, what are the top 10 issues that affect them on a daily basis, and whether race and racism is in their top 5, they would say no. It may not make their lower 5, because they don't experience it. They don't live it. If you were to ask African Americans where race is on their list of daily concerns, it would be number 1, or at least in the top 5, because we can't hide who we are. We can't hide what we do. We can't pass, like my mother did, often in trips from Mississippi to Joliet. It's upon us, and we feel it, and it manifests itself in our daily life. My experience as an African American and my white brother's experience in America are completely diametrically opposed. Therein lies the problem. You ask the same question on the police, and you get the same results. These results are endemic of our different experiences in these two countries and shape each of our views on race. So what is the answer? What are you talking about? How do we get through this? How do we lead? How are we this powerful of a country? We have a tortured past on the race question and racism and the law. Through slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, segregation, the Civil Rights Movement, America has its history. But we certainly have progressed. But we have never truly confronted the race issue in this country, the roots of it, who we are and what we represent to each other on the race issue. We've treated it, but we haven't cured it. And racism persists from generation to generation. None of us are born with this racism gene. You got one? Is it some gene that is recessed and powerful, whereby when you are born, black, white, yellow, or brown, you have this gene for racism and hatred? No, it's taught in the home. It's taught in the community. That's the root cause. I must tell you, as activists and powerful as my mother and father were, they never taught us to hate. We couldn't say anything wrong or bad about a white person simply because they were white. You may have other reasons, but it couldn't be that. Because my father would preach to us that we were being no better than those who we were fighting against. And that was important integrity to that fight and for a purpose. And the Civil Rights Movement was about black people and brown people and white people and yellow people fighting together. We didn't succeed simply because we were black. We succeeded because we had a rainbow coalition, very diverse coalition, understanding and pushing forward for a better America. And so, why are we so afraid to discuss it? Why, when black people start talking at the water cooler, they lower their voices when they talk about black issues or civil rights issues? Why are white people so afraid to talk about it? Because they've progressed. It may be a tortured history, a killing history, an offensive history, but why not talk about it if we've made the progress that they so want to embrace? They must be forced to confront it. We must be forced to confront it and its manifestations. As I said, we have not cured it, we have simply addressed it. And it's up to each of us to change that dialogue, to force that dialogue. I call it a national race reconciliation discussion, similar to South Africa and Mandela when he was elected president. They have a tortured history, perhaps worse, of apartheid. We have to create a safe space to begin the very difficult and painful discussions on the history of race and racism and its impact on all of us. We have to be comfortable about it. If you're a racist, you got a place at the table. If you're a black member of Black Lives Matter, you got a place at the table. If you're a black, white, yellow, brown, you get a place at the table. And we've got to make it comfortable for all of us. We can cure, or rather educate, the ignorant. We can understand our histories, cultures, to appreciate our differences and why we feel the way we feel, and to change, most importantly, to break down barriers and to keep us apart, and even, for some, to even love one another. It begins with a dialogue and being comfortable talking about it. This has to come from the federal government and a national discussion on this. There must be a place at the table for all of us, as I've said, and to break down those barriers. This is tough stuff. This is tough stuff. Not easy by any means, but quite necessary. We may not get there, but we have to try. America's success depends on it. Our survival depends on it. Are you ready? Let's try. Just try. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, very much for an intriguing and tough topic. At this time, we are going to transition into our question-answer dialogue session. And so before doing so, I'd like to introduce two of my colleagues who have graciously taken on the task of moderators slash they're going to lead our discussion in terms of questions and answers. So Tammy Thurman, who is an interim co-chair for our Justice Law Public Safety program here at Lewis University. She's also an assistant professor in the undergraduate program. And then Umazia, who is here with us as well. Uma's over here and Tammy's over there. Uma is also an interim co-chair for the program, and she's also the director of paralegal studies here at the institution. So thank you both very much. We're going to open it up by asking if the audience has any questions, and I'm going to move the mic so that Scott has a mic as well. Any takers, any responses at this point? Talking points. Did I see a hand up front? No? Okay. All right. So we have a question. Who do we have? Please raise your hand because they're going to bring the mic to you.
Oh. How you doing, Scott? Alan.
Good.
Hey, Scott.
Alan A. Scott.
My question is this: how important do you think economics is in the black community as far as rectifying some of that history and being bold and empowered to move forward?
I think it's super important. I forgot to recognize one person, Aunt Lita, my aunt, one of my mother's best friends, and Uncle Orland, who's with us in spirit, without a doubt. I love you. I forgot to recognize you, and great friends and relatives of my family. And Uncle Orland was the first person to teach me how to play golf, or at least to take me golfing at Inwood, if you will. He and my dad played years ago and stuff, but when I got to college, and so love him to death and miss him to death as well. Great musician, awesome musician, without a doubt. On the economics piece, that really is the next frontier for our communities of color. Martin Luther King Jr., before he died, was headed there. He was headed. He was headed to the Vietnam War. He started that. But social justice and economics, he understood that even if we got voting rights and our political rights in store, that we could do nothing without the money, without the power of economics and rotating dollars in our own community, if you will. And we've never been really good at that. We've gotten better at it. But we are a community of consumers, and we've got to be a community of investors and savers. We don't even inherit wealth in our communities. Very small percentage, right, compared to other communities. We got to change that. You know, you can get an insurance policy for $250,000, $500,000, $100,000. Right? Pay on it, make your mother and father or your kids or your grandkids the beneficiaries of it, and when the good Lord calls you, they get that money. They get $100,000, $250,000. You can get some policies for $10 or $25 a month, right? We don't even do that. And so the majority of wealth in this country comes from what? Inheritance, real estate, family wealth, perhaps entrepreneurship is last on that list. But there's nothing stopping us from that. Investing in our black businesses, right, in our communities, circulating our dollars so it benefits our communities. Every community ought to do that. Others do it better than us, right? And so I think you're right. We got to be laser-like focused. You know, we got voter suppression issues coming up in 2018. We've had them. And we obviously have to look at Congress and the House and the White House and what the result in 2018 and 2020 will be. But in the interim, we can do this on our own as families, right? If you're employed, I don't care how much you make, you can get an insurance policy with the beneficiaries, your kids, or you can give that policy to your parent and make them put it on them, and then it's a gift to their grandkids. Every grandmother and grandfather would love to do it, especially if you're going to pay the monthly bill. I mean, simple stuff we can do to empower our community. And then we become investors and less consumers. Because what we consume and how much money we spend, right, is larger than some nations in this country. Just our black community, our African-American community. And so the next time you spend that dollar, are you spending it in your community to circulate it, or are you investing, or are you consuming? Let's be better investors. Thanks. Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Understanding what you just explained to all of us, would you agree that it's also a mindset that we as a black race have absorbed in our lives? So would you agree, or could you go further in how we can erase that negative mindset that we don't deserve what we do and can have?
Okay, so let's talk about black people. You want to air some dirty laundry today? All right, let's get to getting, as my grandmother used to say. Okay, so it's not our fault that our mindset is the way it is. Think about our journey in chains. And it may be 250 years ago, but look at our journey through Reconstruction, through segregation, the Klan. I mean, if we were enslaved and then we were freed and you gave us a piece of land and then you took it, what do we have left as a community, unlike any other group of people in this country? You're the only ones that came in chains. You never got your 40 acres and a mule. You don't have any history or culture because you came from Ghana and Senegal and Africa, and only a 5 to 10% of us came to the U.S. to pick cotton. The sugar barons of South America, as far as Australia, had more slaves, lots more slaves than in the United States of America. They went to Africa for sugar cane. That was the biggest product around at that time. It wasn't cotton. We figured out cotton, and then we were freed. And we were never really free because we were always terrorized. So no history, no culture, no real sense of family. They took care of that on the plantation. And so we are this group of people kind of lost and looking, not for legitimacy, but for excellence. And every time we've tried to do something about it, we get pushed back and beat back. No other group in this country like that. And yet we get blamed for the ills of this country, entitlements and what have you. You know who the biggest entitlement states are in the country? That is Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, SNAP, you name it, right? You think the biggest the biggest recipients of those entitlements are people of color? I hope not. By the sheer numbers, it can't be. But you know the biggest red states have the biggest entitlements? Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, say it with me. All Southern, all Republican, all red, and leaders in the acceptance of entitlements. So when the Republicans say X, Y, and Z about entitlements, right, to close the budget deficit, they're hurting their own people. So, okay, so that's the landscape, right? So we can't, as a community, all jump on therapy and get in therapy and stuff. But what we certainly can do is understand our history, create and recapture our culture and history, and be committed to our strength. Nothing wrong with that, of wanting to build a better community and being committed to it. Every other group in this country is. Asians, our Jewish brothers and sisters, our African brothers and sisters, they do it well. They come here, and I understand you got racism and bank discrimination and all these other things, right? But in our self-determination, we got to fight through that or get through that, right? That can't be an excuse to success, because your success is more important than that. It's more important. It's 2018. It's more important than that. We will continue to fight racism continue to fight people who have nothing but harm in their minds for us, politically, economically, otherwise. But it's up to us. It really is. It's up to us. You got to take responsibility. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. You know, Malik Mills, that's a rapper, isn't it? That's some rapper? Tell me. I guess we don't have enough young folks in here, but he on probation for 10 years. He's up in Philly, and there's a call celebrity to free him. That somehow he was, you know, he's being done wrong by the criminal justice system. He's being done wrong by not taking responsibility for himself, because he's been arrested 2 or 3 times when you're on probation, and you know what probation means, right? You can't jaywalk. And so I argue often that it's about our personal responsibility. Not everybody who's in jail in the penitentiary, but a lot of folks in the penitentiary, if they wasn't the first time they went there, they got to take personal responsibility, save, invest. And so it's hard, but I think the stronger we get, the more sophisticated we get, and the more we take care of our communities and do business with one another, the better we'll be. And that's not much of an answer, but that really is the answer. It's just got to manifest itself. Thank you. All right.
Is there any?
Good afternoon.
My man.
Good to see you, Alan.
I ain't recognize you.
It's been a while.
So long.
It's been a while. I've been in
It's
Atlanta.
a real warrior right here.
That's what people
A
say.
real warrior.
But Kathleen and your dad paved the way. I can remember the first election he was involved in. He lost by 23 votes, and I cried. And your mama said to me, "Tony Ray, don't cry. Ray gonna be a judge anyway." So I learned about the fact that you can be appointed and you can be elected. I'm an alumni of Lewis University. I remember coming here years ago when it was a takeover in the radio station over here. My mom was here, Margaret, good friend of Ray and Kathleen's. But my question is, the church is one of the only institutions that we actually own. And I think that the church has been very, very silent in terms of this question of race, racism, and the law. And so I'd like to ask, what would be your perspective on involving the black church in this conversation, also involving the black church in the social political movement that involves us all. In fact, that was one of the reasons that Jesus was crucified by the Pharisees, wasn't it? Because of his politics. So if you can give a viewpoint on that and how we can take the message from the pulpit, and I'm not just talking about actually not just the black church, but all theologians in terms of recognizing the dilemma that the country is in and the moral slump that we're in, how the country has been witnessing the church being so silent about it. Yeah.
And tolerant.
And tolerant.
If you're a congregant, you got to demand that they take responsibility for it. And if you're a congregant in the conservative right church, what's the term? The conservative white church? The evangelicals. God bless them. The evangelicals, right? And their tolerance for what's coming out of the White House and others. And our black churches give you great rhetoric, and good ones have great ministries to attack these issues and to lead on these issues. But not enough. The business of religion, the Catholic Church is a multi-billion-dollar industry. The Baptists, a multi-billion-dollar industry. I got no problem with that. But if you're that big and got that many congregants, and all religion, all sectors, I'm not talking just about the Baptist and the Catholic, all of them, right? How do you measure your success as a religious institution? Is it the number of faith followers? Is it your ministries? If it's how many people you touch? Or is it something else? You know, the number one reason people pick their church The number one reason they pick their church isn't the religion, isn't the minister, it's convenience. Do they have a parking lot? How close are they located to my home? I'll tell you, I know that because I read statistics and polls all the time. I smoke cigars on Sunday nights with some of the leading ministers in Washington, D.C. You learn, you sit and listen to some ministers in the business of religion. And so for me, the measure of their ministries has to be not those levels, but their impact in the community, and their social impact, their political impact, and their financial investment. I love churches that own homes and affordable housing units, and own stores, if you will, and investment properties. Nothing wrong with that, because you can certainly see how the investment has changed their community. Those are ministries that are lucrative, not just for the church, but for the community. I'd love to have every church, big or small, think like that. And by the way, if you're too small to do it, partner with another church, right? Now, you got to be willing to partner, and you got to be willing to put down your politics and put down what drives us that is not of the Lord. But you know, if you could do it, you could see the bigger and broader impact on the community wide. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's about reality. You know, my coach tells me all the time that you vote with your feet. You know, when I'm never at home, and that's a lot, you know, I used to say, but I want to be home. I want to be better. I love my family. I love my home. This is where I want to be. And my coach told me, you where your feet take you. You are where your feet take you, right? So if the churches want to get into this social impact space, they'll go to that space and measure their success based on their impact. If you're not doing that, then that doesn't make you a bad church or a bad congregation. It just means you're not ready to go all in on social impact or economic impact or even impact. Because churches have a lot of political impact, despite the fact that they are, you know, we have separation of church and state. And so it's an intentionality and it's a willingness. You don't have the intentionality and you don't have the willingness, it will show itself. That's not a complicated answer. Any one of you all could have given that one. You do whatever you want to do in churches and businesses and law firms and accounting firms. They do what's important. They invest time, money, and resources in it. You don't invest it, you're going to get what you get. Yep. You want? Okay. I think they got over here and then right here.
Hi, my name is Megan Horsted, and my question for you is, what impact, if any, do you feel social media and news media can have in getting people of this nation to the table to really have a discussion on race?
If you would start that discussion on social media, I think it would be awesome, right? But when you go to social media, what do you see? What do you see? I mean, people are being themselves. Profanity, overt racism, offensive words. They hide behind fake names, right? I got to tell you, whenever I'm on Fox News and I'm making my point as a Democrat, I get phone calls, emails, and social media messages that I have to send to security, Reed Smith Security. They are profane. They are offensive. Even death threats. After Carlson and Laura Ingraham, I got death threats. Now, I'm from Joliet. You know, somebody call you and tell you or threatening you, I don't really worry about those folks. I worry about the ones who haven't called. They're going to show up at Reed Smith. I've never been afraid of a bully or that someone says, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. You know, because that's the one that's going to be the easiest to take out. But I worry about the ones that don't say it and just seethe. And so from time to time, we've had to have security, you know, in the building and so forth and so on. But social media would be awesome. You can connect with millions of people for the right thing and for the wrong thing. And so if you and your friends and others could start that movement and start that dialogue, let me tell you something. It's effective. It's efficient. But people got to figure out where they want to go in this country, who they want to be. Why are we so angry? Why are we so ignorant about each other? You know, like sometimes my white friends think, you know, all lives matter, Black Lives Matter is some radical group. Radical group. People getting shot out here. And it's not that they're any better. They're reminding the police and reminding authorities that our lives matter too. I can hold a gun in the middle of Joliet, and I guarantee you, well, not Joliet, I shouldn't do that, anywhere in America. And I got to tell you, are the police going to try to talk me out of that weapon? How long will they give me? Me. I'd be dressed like this and have a gun and be mentally unstable. It's clear. How long are they going to give me with that gun? Are they going to talk me down? They're going to take me to psychiatric ward? What are my odds of getting out of there alive? I wish they were higher, but, you know, right? Now, you take the same white lawyer, crazy with a gun. We've seen it on video. Drunk, South Carolina, North Carolina. Man, they do a lot of talking. Put the gun down. You know, they may not even have their guns drawn. He going to the psychiatric ward. He gonna make it. He might make it. He might not. But what are my odds? Just 3 months ago, our alarm went off in Chevy Chase, D.C. You know, that's a Tony neighborhood. I love my neighborhood. My wife was gone. My son was gone. And so the neighbors called me and said, the police are at your house. We think the alarm went off, Scott. You better get home. I said, I'm on my way. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. I'm in a very nice truck, right? And for that 1.5 miles to get home, the hair stood up on my back. I started going through scenarios of my interaction with the police. I didn't want any mistakes, right? I'm in a really nice truck. I went in my wallet and took out my license and put it on top of the dash, right? Because I don't want to tell them, go get my license, and I got to get shot. Well, you told me to get my license, right? I want no mistakes. I'm 55. I'm successful. I got a family. I love. All I want to do is get through this. And I own the home. And I own the truck. But I'm going through this because of what I've seen and what I've been through. I pull up, and nobody's there. They had left. I was so relieved. Now, maybe that's me. Someone that doesn't look like me can't understand that probably. I'm overdramatic and what have you. But I'm about living as long as I can, and I don't want any mistakes. Anybody that call my wife or write a letter to my father and say, we are sorry. This is real. It may not be real to everybody, but it's real for African women, right? We get a conversation on race reconciliation. I can sit down and share that story. The police can sit down and share their story. This is why. And you know what? We can get to some common ground. And then maybe we can get to training our police officers differently, right? And be more engaged in our community. So I got a shot versus not.
Scott,
Yeah.
I do have a question here. You know, and thank you for the narrative and kind of walking us through the history of how you grew up. I think it's really important to at least recognize what you went through. In preparing for this, you know, I was looking at some YouTube videos that you had also done for Fox News, CNN. My question is this. So race relations in the U.S. is becoming a central part of our conversation, whether it's athletes kneeling, or white nationalists rallying in Charlottesville, which eventually led to the death of a young female. Do you think there actually is a meaningful conversation occurring on race relations, or are these incidents masking our confusion on how to talk about race relations?
If we are talking, we're not talking enough. And we're not having an authentic conversation rooted in integrity. What is fake news? I don't know what fake news is. Where I come from, that's a lie. Stealing is stealing, cheating is cheating, and lying is lying. That's all it is. There's no in between. And now we have fake news. And so until we get rid of fake news or the allegation, like I never understood why CNN and Fox and all these other stations put people on and they're just lying. You gonna believe me or your lying eyes? Just objectively, just false information. And so if we're gonna have that conversation on race reconciliation, then we certainly have to have integrity in those discussions. If you're not committed to integrity, then you can't have it. You could do it one-on-one with your community. One-on-one. Don't be offended if they say something that you think or probably is racist or ignorant. Okay, you got to listen. They got to listen to us, right? Listen, right? You can educate the ignorant. You can have a standoff and be done with it. Some people can't be helped. They're just raised that way. And I'm talking about black people and white people. Don't get me wrong. Listen, a lot of growth out there. Have that authentic conversation rooted in integrity. And I guarantee you, we can get there. When I do call back my critics who aren't profane, or maybe on social media they are, right? I engage in them every once in a while. You know what I say after they call me out my name and call me the N-word? I say, you don't even know me. What are you talking about? And that's not what I said. They write back something else. So you love this country more than I do, right? Really? You do? We get to talking. They're military veterans, some of them and stuff. I talk about my father and my uncle who died in the Korean War and stuff. And before you know it, the whole conversation changes in writing. Now, we are going to convince each other to get there, but at least the dialogue is reasonable. You know what I mean? It's not name calling and all that comes along with that. We got to figure out why we're so angry in this country. And till we figure that out, rightfully or wrongfully, we're in for some tough days. Whether it's Joliet or New York or D.C., you know? I have angst about this country. You know, I do. I've never been more uncomfortable in this country in my life. I'm worried about what happens next. I've never been that way. I'm 55 years old. I grew up in a loving family. I had a successful legal career. Why should I be worried about the country and the direction and what's next in North Korea and Russia? And hell, why do I have to be worried about the voting machines when I go vote? I mean, this is like some new stuff. And nothing's being done about it. At least if you believe what I think is pretty reliable information, you know. There's some fear. Somebody in our administration and the leadership of this country is afraid of what's going to be found, right? But democracy demands that it be found, and we're going to move forward. And we got through some tough times in this country. We're going to get through this, right? But we got to stand together, and we got to push together. Because what did Martin Luther King say? I think he said, we will surely forget about our enemies, but we will never forget those who stood in silence during our trials and tribulations. Words to that effect. Got a lot of people standing around, you know, tolerating stuff because of power and the pen, you know. Where are the statesmen of our country? Black, white, yellow, brown. Where are they? Who stand up like the Jack Kemps of the world or the Howard Bakers, who stood up and put country over party, right? We ain't putting country over party no more. It's all about party. I'm talking about Democrats and the Republicans, right? Got to change that, and you can change by that ballot box, so long as we can keep them safe. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bolden, we have one more audience question.
Thank you. I think I understand how we got here politically, getting from Obama to what we have today. When Obama came into power, we was losing like 800,000 jobs a month. At some point, Trump is going to move on. What is happening to our government that's allowing things to happen? I remember Obama being at Boehner and Mitch McConnell's bridge. They was trying to fix it 8 years ago. 8 years ago. Now they're going to pass this budget maybe with a couple of $1 trillion. Why are our government, why are the guys that's in the government, what's being done behind the scene that we're missing that's going to be a long-range effect on this country, on all of us, no matter what color we are? Because we see what he's doing with Obama changing all the things that he did. What are we missing?
Well, I wish I was behind the scenes. Listen, I don't think you're missing anything. 60% of Americans disagree with the direction of this country. 60%. Tax policy, immigration, DACA, name the big ones, right? Deficit, blowing holes in, the deficit. 60%. But the Republicans control all three houses. And until you can get control of one of those houses, you're at their beck and mercy. I mean, I got to tell you, everybody agrees. The majority of Americans believe that DACA should get legislation to stay in this country so they don't have to go back to a country that they've never known before, right? The president, instead of doing a separate bill on DACA, right, real simple, he puts it in a big bill. And the bigger bill has his wall. Like he think a wall is going to keep him out. I'm for border security, but the wall's not going to happen, and Mexico's supposed to pay for it. Now we're going to pay for it, and we're going to go after Mexico later. Okay. But he wants to end chain migration, family migration, whereby you can bring others in. And he wants to end the diversity program that supports people of different backgrounds, mostly from Africa, in a lottery system to come to America. If that's not a racist policy, the disparate impact of that policy certainly is racist. It just is. So I think that the Democrats are powerless. I think the Republicans simply don't have the wherewithal to fight hard enough. Because remember, Donald Trump controls 35% of his core base. So that's 35% of the votes, right? That's a lot of votes depending on what jurisdiction you're in, what state you're in. He can't win with that 35. So his electoral base is that 35 plus the 15 or more who don't like the Democrats or didn't like Hillary Clinton, don't like Donald Trump, but voted for Donald Trump simply because they were either disgusted with Hillary Clinton or they liked his tax plan, or they didn't really care about what he said and how he said it. They cared about what he was going to do, shake up Washington, which he's not done. So he still can't get elected with that 35 in 2020. His goal is that the tax cuts and some of the other stuff he's doing where you personally benefit from it, he can grow that to 50, 55%. But the elements are really different in 2020 and 2018. Women are going to vote. People of color are going to vote. We ain't vote. We thought it was a done deal. Better vote. And not just register. Go vote. So behind the scenes, there's not a lot we can do. But in front of the scenes, in states across this country, there's a lot you can do. You can voter suppression. You can fight that. Bar associations got a game plan for that. if it's a Republican-controlled House and Senate, unfortunately, either nothing happens or it'll be very close. That's why 2018 to the Democrats is really important. If you can take one or both of those houses back, and I don't like to see anybody get impeached because, in my opinion, it's bad for America, but it may be necessary for America. Okay? So you got to get one of those houses back. I have no confidence the Republicans are going to do anything because he's got the power of the pen. That's what this is all about. They've got the power now, and their policies, as bad as they are, right? And as much as you disagree with them, it's their policies, and they're going to implement it. And this is what you're seeing. Not just unwriting the laws that Barack Obama put forth, but getting rid of regulations, lower taxes in the short term. But that deficit, they've blown a $3 billion hole in that deficit. It's going to come back to roost on us and our kids, okay? And the Republicans were always deficit hawks. Now they're spending money like crazy. They're spending more money than Democrats would spend. There's a lot of money. The infrastructure bill, it doesn't include jobs, job training, entrepreneurship for people of color or poor communities. You might get the Dems to support it, but it's all about the money. It's all about business and corporate America. And so I don't think there's anything that can be done right now other than the press exposes it. You got to vote, got to register, got to vote, and you got to change things, local, state, and national level. And if you don't vote, then you don't care. All
Okay,
right.
Mr. Bolden, the last question for the presentation. And I think it's a question that poses interesting questions about race in our culture, and particularly about black imagery. Are you going to go see Black Panther?
That's your question? I hear it's an awesome movie, and yes, and I encourage everyone to go see it and to take your kids. Chadwick is an outstanding actor. And you know, my hope for this country is that our kids do better than we do. And their kids on this race question. My twin daughters are 23. They got as many black friends as white friends. They do. Their white friends listen to hip hop and rap more than they do, right? I'm not crazy about the words they repeat in the lyrics. That's a whole nother story. But I got to believe that as we progress, that the racism, the generational racism taught by our families in those communities, it gets lesser and lesser. And maybe that's how we kind of transform it. Maybe that's it. But I hope black people, white people, brown and yellow go to see the Black Panther because it's going to be just as entertaining. I mean, I went to see Wonder Woman and Superman and all those other superheroes. I didn't care what color they were. But we seem to care so much about race. So the Black Panther, it's a black superhero. We have other black superheroes, you know, not the lead, if you will. So I hope we bust records and everybody gets paid on it. And you know what? If your race and racism stop you from going to see Black Panther for entertainment purposes, I got to tell you, we just got a lot to do. Because you're missing a great movie, you know? You know, what was the movie with the women, the African-American women? What is it? Hidden Figures. You know the one thing I took from that movie, and maybe you all didn't, it was a great movie, is how expensive and what an annoyance and how unproductive racial segregation was in the 60s and 50s. It was unproductive. It was unnecessary. It was inconvenient. These women were working on rockets to the moon, and they couldn't get their work done because they had to go across the campus just to use the bathroom. How dumb is that? It's just dumb. And you could apply it to any other industry. So you got black bathroom, white bathroom. Got white water, black water. What germs do I have that white people don't have? Tell me. I'll go see a doctor. Tell me. Tell me how my heart is different than my white brothers. Right? Am I? It just makes no sense. It's never made sense to me. You know, it never made sense to me. But let me say this. Let me thank you all for coming out. It has been an incredible time being here with you as family and friends. It really has. And, you know, this is one of the toughest speeches I've done because of family and friends being here. It is not easy, you know. And I'm sure my father and my wife and my family are going to give me feedback, good, bad, and ugly. But one thing's for sure, I did my very best to present and to lead and to share with you this story of race, racism, and the law. I hope you deeply appreciated it. Thank you.
Before you depart, I'd like to just give out a couple thank yous. I could not have done this without my wonderful sister in spirit, Marisa Rocha, who serves as the Assistant Director in Multicultural Student Services. I'd like to thank also the Lewis University Police Department, who, when I thought about this topic, I was like, Jim, how do you feel? And he was like, come on, Christy, it's good. So I just want to recognize the department for agreeing to have, to have this type of a discussion on campus. And then last but not least, my administration, from Dr. Livingston, our president, Dr. Kerr Shackmuth, who serves in our mission and identity, amongst other things that he does, Joe Felice, who serves as our senior vice president of student services, which is where my department is housed, and my wonderful colleagues and students who have shown up today. So again, thank you very much for your partnership. And Scott, thank you a million times for doing this for me. At this time, I'd like to call up Michael Parker, who is a member of the Lewis University Board of Trustees. He has served as a member of the Board of Trustees from 2003 until 2015, and he's back with us as of 2017, who'll give us our closing remarks.
Certainly I want to thank everybody for coming. There's a couple of words here I just want to point out. The word community is a very powerful word. The word family is a very powerful word. If I heard Scott correctly, and I've wrestled not to say the word Allen, if I've heard Scott correctly, what he said was if people had these conversations at home, we'd have a different place. Racism is an interesting thing because it's there. And it's not always as intentional as one thinks because we find it everywhere. But the conversations that Scott was talking about, those conversations are the ones that people need to have. He mentioned something else, which is so important. And it's truly called generational wealth. So we don't support our community in the way we should. Well, we don't support our families in the way we should, because what Scott pointed out a minute ago was how many families have the breadwinner pass and don't have anything to pass on, but it gets bigger than that because the breadwinner passes and he leaves funeral expense to his or her family, which is making it even worse. Additionally, the word silence is, I could hear, Scott wasn't saying that, but think about the word silence. The less we talk about this issue, the worse it'll be. So if you look at Sunday, a very important day, but if you look at Sunday, I bet you can figure out the most segregated hour in our country, and that's when people go to church. But if people turn and they talk to each other about this, this is one of the reasons we wanted Scott to come here, because he could have that conversation without worrying about whether anybody's going to vote for him next week, okay? He could have the conversation, he could say things, and you know, there were people, I got to tell you, there were people that might not have been comfortable with some of the things said. But when you can have that conversation without worrying about whether or not you're in office next term, it's a great conversation. Because somewhere along the line, the word racism makes everybody just a little more tight. When the truth of the matter is, the word racism should make everyone want to open up a little bit more. So, I'm going to get out of your way, but first I want to say this. It was a great idea to have Scott come here because Scott is very honest about things. He goes in to the lion's den and talks to people that don't necessarily like his views, and he does it very well. And if you don't believe me, turn on Fox News, turn on Fox Business News, turn on some of those shows, and watch the way he does it. It's very, very smart and very calculated because somebody needs to hear some of these views. This is Black History Month. Why is that important? Well, it's important to me. I want it to be important to all of you because somewhere along the line, it's just nice to recognize that a group of people somewhere along the line have a right to be proud of our history no matter how it's been impaired by things that have happened. So I say, first of all, I want to hear applause for my friend, Scott, because he came here. And we certainly thank him. I do want to say that you talked about Black Panther, and that's going to be a heck of a movie. As a matter of fact, my son-in-law called me and he said, "You want to go see it?" And I said, yeah. We couldn't find a place that you could see the movie in the first week. Now, we had to pull in we had to do some things to get into this movie. There has been no movie that's been pre-sold. Now, I'm not trying to sell the movie, but I'm going to say this to you. Do some things you haven't done. Sit with people you haven't sat with. But when we talk about superheroes, I do want to point out one more time, having grown up in Joliet, that Raymond Bolden was one of my superheroes. He was so super that he got me out of my first marriage and he married me the second time I got married. But he was good other than that, don't get me wrong. So thank you all for coming and certainly travel safely. We are glad we were able to pull everybody in this room to have this conversation. Thanks so much.